and I do that for the.
Oops, sorry, I forgot to do that.
Now recording. Yeah, I would do that for where my bag is. So I'd take pictures of the bag, take pictures of where the bike is, and I'll do that the same for T2. I'll look at if you come in to T2, you come past that corner where the traffic lights are, turn left, and then the guys take the railings out there. So then you come into transition, and I will have practiced. I'm just making this up. I might be second row along, 8 racks down, and then I'll walk it once, and then I'll actually jog it and run it a few times, because I've done this and I've seen, so you can waste 3 minutes wandering about transition, losing your bike, forgetting where to put your bike back. So just that practice means that on the day it's going to go a lot more smoothly. Yeah. There's a million tips here. One of mine is, I've just said to one of my athletes, is as I come out of the swim, I tend to get the goggles up so I can see, start undoing the wetsuit. Do not run at full speed, because the crowd is going to send you crazy up that hill into T1. Keep it under control, get the wetsuit off, and then I tend to pull my swim cap and goggles into the wetsuit, and then they disappear into the arm, and then I know they're sort of safe. I'm probably not going to lose them. I mean, you often lose or find a pair of goggles at an Ironman. And then just keep thinking about moving purposefully, but not racing through transition. If you try and race through transition, that's where you suddenly get to the bike and find you've not got your shoes with you, or you've forgotten your helmet, or as I've done, I've arrived at the seat with the wrong bag. So just keep it under control. You can lose more by going too fast than being purposeful.
And if you've identified,
talk all day on this, but
if you've identified a plan, then just stick to it. Don't doubt it. Don't change it last minute. If you're going to put socks on in T1, or you decide to put them on in T2, then that's done and dusted. Just stick with whatever you've planned beforehand.
I'd say just keep it as simple as possible. The fewer decisions that you have to make in transition, the better. Some people might want to grab some food in transition, save it to when you're on the bike. I'm going to run in. I'm not going to put socks on because I've not planned it. My shoes are on the bike. I'm not deciding whether I'm going to wear my shoes or not. Just really keep as fewer decisions as possible. And then probably the only other one, similar to what Tony was saying, is just take one moment just to say, okay, that's the swim done. It's done. Forget about it. Now it's onto the bike with half an idea on, I'm doing the bike. This is the plan, and this is the plan because we've got the run afterwards. But you just take that moment to kind of reset, really.
Yeah. And if there's guys on who haven't done Ironman before, I mean, they typically, the transition tents that will be very similar to each other from T1 to T2, and you'll get to see them when you rack your bike and when you drop your run bag off the day before. And as Tony said, you can walk through and you can have a look, and you can sort of picture your passage through that tent. So generally down the sides of the tent, there will be chairs all the way down the sides, and you can take your bag from its peg, which you'll roughly know where you've put it. And then you can sit on a chair if you want to. So you can sit down, take the wetsuit off, or you can then get your stuff out your bag, helmet goes on, and then etc. And you can sit down and do all that. Everything has to go back into your bag again, and then you hang it up. Or you can throw it, I think, to somebody at the end normally. So that's done. And then you'll do similar in T2. It will be a very similar layout. Your bag will be on the same point of the racking as it is in T1. So you're not having to remember 2 different sort of places for your bag. So that's quite handy. So you'll check that out the day before. And as Tony says, just run through it either physically or mentally in your head. And that's absolutely fine.
Yeah. Phil, just one more tip. And this came from my wife, who's not a triathlete. As I remember on my first race, I'd prepped my bags the night before, or to drop them off in the morning. And I was in my bag and out my bag and in my bag and out my bag, trying to remember what was in there. And she said, lay your bag out, put your stuff out, take a picture, and then put the bags in the corner, because it's much easier to be able to just, get your phone and look at the picture. It just helps relieve a little bit of anxiety, or did I?
Yeah.
So that I found that's a great tip.
Use technology, rather than keep checking. That's a good point. Yeah. And then another one was, obviously, if you're living local or you maybe got somebody to help take you to the race start, where's the best place to get dropped off? And I think in the race pack or the race notes, it says to get dropped off by the Holiday Inn on the retail park. That's where the coaches or the buses tend to drop off when they bring people from Bolton on the morning. I think it's a little bit further away, but if you're coming from the north or probably from like the Manchester side, from the east, to Pennington Flash, then that might be suitable because of the roads. But if you're coming from the west or from the south, which is the way that I would normally come from Warrington area, just on the end of the road where you walk straight up into the Flash, the main access road, there's a fire station and I think a little car sales lot opposite, and just literally get dropped off there, and you've got one straight road, the access road that you normally drive into Pennington Flash, and that's my preferred route in. I don't think you need to go past it and be parking on the Holiday Inn. And that way, you've also got to walk across the golf course, which if it's been wet or there's a lot of dew on the grass, depending on what you've got on your feet, it's not a great way to start the day at sort of 4:30 in the morning to be walking across soppy grass in your hotel slippers that you've pinched, the week before. So I'd go for the end of the lane. That's the main access road to Pennington Flash. Do I pack nutrition on the bike when I rack it or on race morning? Well, in brief, on race morning. Don't leave anything on your bike that isn't needed till the day before. So your Garmin computer, I'd put on the morning. Even if you've got a built-in hydration bottle, that goes on the next morning, or at least you fill it the next morning. The straw that I drink out of, that would go on the next morning. Basically, you don't want to be leaving anything about that doesn't really need to be there. If you can cover your bike, the other bit I'd say is maybe take some bin bags with you or plastic bags, because if it's due to rain overnight, you probably want to keep, it's not too bad, the saddle. That's the bit we perhaps want to cover, but that doesn't really matter because you're going to be pretty damp getting out the lake anyway. But cover the bars so they don't get really slippy. And I would, particularly if you've just taken the time to have your bike serviced and your chain lubricated or waxed or whatever, cover that as well, because you don't want that being wringing wet through all night and maybe catching some debris if it's a bit windy. Now, Ironman can be a bit funny, and quite often they remove all of your attempts to sort of look after your bike. So even if you do that, you might find that in the morning some race official has been round and taken it off, but they can't stop you trying, I don't think. So it's probably still worth a go. If we're lucky and the weather is fine, then obviously you don't need to worry about that. And then hopefully the weather does look quite good for race day. So that shouldn't be a big issue. Has anybody else got a point on the racking? I don't think anybody would advise putting it on the day before, would they, in any circumstances? No. Yep. So yeah, just have it all laid out at home. Put it in your white bag, perhaps, which is going to be your streetwear bag, and carry it in that. And then obviously when you take your trackie off or your coat or whatever you've gone in, your beanie hat, then put that in when you've finished, and you can take your nutrition out at that point. Okay, next one. What have we got? Is it a good idea to take a gel before the swim start? So again, John, I'll ask you your opinion in a second, and Tony. I would just say yes, particularly if you've practiced it. There's a little bit of doubt as to whether you're taking about 20, 30 minutes before, or whether you bang it in right before the start. But I do out of habit, and it's just basically topping up your blood glucose a little bit. You've had a good breakfast. It's probably not essential. You could probably get away without it, but we know on the swim, you're not going to get anything for at least about an hour or so. So does you no real harm. My other point would be take a cold bottle of water as well, just fresh water. That's useful for sipping on, particularly when you're getting a bit nervous, and for washing that gel down. But it's also good for rinsing out the goggles. If you can't get in the water beforehand, I think a good tip for stopping them fogging up is to rinse them with cold water, and also rinse your face with cold water, because you need to match the temperature. If your eyeballs or your face is really warm and the water's quite cold, it's more likely to fog up just because of the temperature differential. So if you've got the anti-fog on, great, but I like just a bottle of water, and I'll rinse my face a few times just before the start, and I'll rinse the goggles inside just to see if that helps with the fogging issue as well. John, nutrition?
As per the other questions, really, if you normally take a gel before you swim, then yes. If you don't change what you normally do. I personally don't. If I've eaten well leading up to the event and I've had a good breakfast, there may be a snack 30, 40 minutes out, then I don't personally feel it's necessary. I'd save the refueling from the bike. And I don't really want the body tuning into that really simple fuel sources too early, because it's a long event.
Yeah.
I want it to be able to go, right, I'll start working on the fats nice and early. But if you give it simple food, it will default to that every time. And we're not saying you're not going to tap into your fat supplies. It just may take a little bit longer. So but that's my personal choice.
Tony, do you bang a gel in?
Yeah, I do. And I found, exactly like you said, if I have one just before, I find it a little bit nasty on the digestion front once you start swimming hard. So that 20-25 minutes before with water, then I don't have a problem. So if you've not had one, if you've not practiced it before, definitely have it well before the swim almost, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, if you want to just reassure yourself, if you've got a couple of swims to do in the next week, even just try it before that, just to check you don't get heartburn or anything like that. You don't want that on race day. So by all means, just even if you're not swimming much this week, just getting the wetsuit on and running through the motions, it might be worth doing a gel 30 minutes before or 20 minutes before. Do your 10-minute jog warm up if that's what you're going to do on race day, and just mimic what race day is going to be about and see if you get any symptoms. And if you don't like it, don't do it. So you've still got time
as well. It's the water, it's the same as some of these alpine lakes, isn't it? I mean, it's drinking water, and you can, sip some of that as you start in the swim.
Yeah, there'll be plenty of that about. Is it worth attending an Ironman swim session in Pennington Flash? So go on, Tony, you can probably carry on with that one because it's most appropriate for you, really.
Yeah, do you know what? I was joking there about drinking that water, guys, by the way. And I did a couple of camps with Brett Sutton years ago, and he was very, very clear on the problem of athletes turning up in remote places, foreign places, water they don't normally swim in, swimming, and then suffering with GI issues. Now, whenever anyone has GI issues, it can be 10 different things, and often all sorts of problems get blamed on that, and the GI issue gets blamed on things. But I do think there possibly is something that, if you've been swimming in your lake or in the pool down south, you travel up and then suddenly drink a litre of the water at the Flash that's got different algae and whatever. I personally think that's a bit of a risk. So I just wouldn't do that extra swim there myself.
Yeah. So I think for the local guys, it's probably less of a risk. If the thing to say is that you're not going to get to swim on the course, so you're not really going to get to check out the sighting markers. Even all the boys won't be in at that point. The big ones may be, but you're not really going to get the right line. You don't start from the starting jetty. They shuffle you down a little bit, and you just have like a 300 or 400 meter loop that you can do. So I don't really see much of a point, unless that there's a slight benefit perhaps if the swim session the day before is this early morning and you can clock where the sun is. If it's a similar weather day, it might help your choice of goggles, and it might help you just see the venue a little bit and reduce stress. But you could probably do that from the shore. You probably don't even need to swim at that point to do that. So yeah, I think it's not essential. I would like my athletes to do a swim 2 to 3 days out, but for me it could be anywhere, and if it has to be in the pool for safety, it's in the pool for safety. So yeah.
On the sun side of things, Phil, it was bright a couple of years ago, and I think it's when you've turned the final buoy coming back in at the end of the loop, that's when you've got the sun in your eyes, from what I remember. So if it's a bright day, that's where people were swimming well off target actually that year. So that's where you might want those tinted goggles maybe, but that's the part where the sun will get you coming back in.
Yeah. So as you know, from that southern end of, is it the southern end? From the bottom end anyway of Pennington Flash, it's probably the west end or something, but where it's like the nature reserve, we don't normally get to swim down at that end really. You're heading out almost down the length of the lake to start with. So if you get there the day before and you can see one of the larger turn buoys are in, I don't think the little buoys will be in at that point. So what they'll normally do is put a buoy maybe every 100 meters or something all the way around, the smaller ones, just to keep you on track. And then obviously the turn buoys are the much bigger, maybe bright orange and really big. You should be able to see them a lot of the time, the bigger ones anyway. But if you can identify something in the distance, a tree or a building or something immovable that you can look at and know that you're in the right direction, even if you miss the buoy, with your sighting, then you don't have to keep lifting your head consistently. Because remember, a sighting only occurs if you lift your head and see what you're aiming to see. If you lift your head and don't spot what you're after, you've got to repeat it, because you could be swimming in the wrong direction. And that's what we want to reduce, really. So if you can identify, you know, the day before, or even on the morning, if you get the chance, a large tree straight over that buoy, if you line yourself up, when you take your first left-hand turn from memory, you're going to be going towards the sailing club at that point. So you're kind of aiming towards the sailing club, which is where you would normally swim from if you swim there regularly. And then, as you say, on your turn back, from my memory, that is the most difficult bit to sight. So again, you may end up following feet a little bit, but obviously you've got to just be cautious that they know where they're going, and still make your effort every 4 to 6 strokes, you know, 8 strokes at the very, very most, to see where you're going.
Yeah, the sighting tip I got taught a few years ago, and I found was very useful, and it might be a bit late for everybody to change now, but I take a double sight, and the brain kind of puts the two pictures together, and I find it keeps me a little bit more on target, and therefore I'm sighting a little bit less often. But it takes a bit of practice.
Yeah. As you say, don't change anything much, but just make sure you spot what you're spotting. Don't think, oh, it's too much effort lifting my head up, I'll just keep going in one direction, because although you may save a little bit of mental effort, if you've just gone 10 strokes in the wrong direction, you've got to get back online, and you'll just end up adding distance and time. So this one's probably just a preference thing, really. Should I get a special needs bag? So we know that Ironman will give you an extra bag that you can fill with your nutrition. When you're in transition, having just got changed in the morning or just arrived on race morning, you can give your bag to the guys at Ironman, and they will transport it to a point on the bike course where you can then decide to stop and pick up your own designated nutrition. Now, that's going to mean that it's a slightly slower stop, because I think they may try to find your bag for you if you shout your number out in advance. But with the COVID restrictions and things, I think it's going to be left to you really to find your bag, or at least to open it and get things out. It's a kind of a management issue. If you need to manage your race really closely and you haven't really had a chance to practice with the on-course nutrition, or you have issues with your stomach on a regular basis, then you should probably do that, because Ironman's all about reducing the chance of things going wrong. It's a long, long day out, and over 12 hours or 14 hours or whatever it's going to take, there's numerous opportunities for things to go wrong. And the two things that you need to manage the most is your pacing and your nutrition. Now, I've always been lucky. I've put, I think twice in 10 races, I've put stuff in a special needs bag and I've just ignored it because I've felt good and I've just gone for what's on the course. And I don't tend to have any major issues with different brands of nutrition. And so I don't do it, but that doesn't mean that I would advocate that. Remember that you can always plan for it and decide not to take it. You know, you're only going to waste a few quid in nutrition products. It's not the end of the world. So if you want to, err on the side of caution, put yourself a bottle or two in to fill up your fluids, or with your chosen energy drink, or put yourself some extra gels or bars in that you might not be able to get on the bike, and then you can choose to pick them up if you want. But again, if you plan to stop and take it, stop and take it, because that's your plan. Manage your day, and that's all I think we probably need to say about the bag. If in doubt, just do it, and then it's there.
You don't have to stop. Yes.
No. So again, you know your body best, and if you want to manage your day very closely, then you should probably prepare for that, and go and get one and fill it if you want to. Concerns about finishing the bike leg within the cutoff. This has got to be a very common one for Ironman UK, because all of the Facebook groups are always awash with people scaremongering about how difficult the bike is, how bad the road surfaces are. Yeah, it's a tough course. Luckily, it's maybe a touch easier this year, but it's still a very, very tough course. Things to remember is you can't necessarily control your speed. Your speed is dependent on the weather, the temperature. It's dependent on the rain or the wind. It's dependent on the road surface. There's so many things that go into your actual speed you can't be looking at speed consistently throughout the race. What I would say is that you need to be getting to 12.5 miles an hour. That's the bottom line to get round in time, is you really need to be holding 12.5 or more. Now, there's a couple of ways first that you might be able to get yourself ahead. So if you're a good swimmer, that saves you time. So the cutoff is 10.5 hours, but it's 10.5 hours from the last person entering the water to give them equal chance to get to the cutoff. So if they're getting in at the 2-hour mark, you know, as they've lined up at the start, and you're starting at the 90-minute mark, you might be in the water 5 or 6 minutes before they even get in. So you've given yourself a head start. And then if they're swimming 2 hours and you're swimming 90 minutes, you've gained more time on the clock, as it were. But still, once you get on the bike, to ride it, you know, you roughly got to hold 12.5 or more. So if you're really worried, you can have that as a backdrop. But what you can't be trying to do is fight that speed from the very first pedal stroke. Again, what I'd say is go back to the process. So you can control your power if you've got power on the bike. So you might have worked out with your coach or with your plan roughly what sort of wattage you'll be pushing. You might decide to go a little bit harder up the hills. Again, you can ride the course. You know, we're not going to be pushing the same downhill because we don't have as much to gain. The bike will already be going pretty quick. And in fact, we'll probably be on the brakes a lot. When you're going uphill, again, we want to minimize the time that you're going slow. So you are going to raise your power up the hills. Some of the hills, unfortunately, are so steep, you just need to ignore power and just get over them. You know, just whatever it is takes to just keep moving and get over them. Unfortunately, that's probably the most difficult thing about Ironman UK, is that some of the hills you can't really control your power, particularly if you're a weaker rider, because if you control your power, you might come to a stop. So you've literally just got to do what it takes. And then another tip is obviously pedal over the top of the hill. Do not stop. Yeah, sorry, John. Do not stop as soon as you see the top of the hill, which is so tempting to do. You know, put your arms in the air and I got over the top of this. No, you've got to get that speed and that momentum back up again. And most of the hills in Bolton are followed by a downhill straight away, and some of them pretty steep. You're going to be getting a good rest as soon as you've got back up to speed. So aim for something maybe 20 seconds or so over the top of the hill, or 100 yards, 200 yards over the top of the hill, and aim for that rather than stopping as soon as you get to the top. The other thing for me that's crucial, whether you're riding a road bike or a TT bike, is you can control your body shape. So keep your elbows tucked in, keep your head down, get on the drops or get on the tops with your elbows flat so that your forearms are directly into the wind and not catching wind in a vertical position. You can change your body shape, and then for the same power, you might be half a mile an hour faster. You might be a mile an hour faster. Even when you're getting tired, just control your body shape and be mindful of how high your head is in the air. Now, obviously, we see that with the top TT bikes and the top guys riding TT bikes, and they look so aero and down low and everything. We're not saying you need to go to that extent, but any improvement you can make is going to make you faster across the course. And finally, for me, the other thing that I said is manage your nutrition. If you miss nutrition early on because you are not mindful of it or you feel good, it's going to come back and bite you in the ass. This is a long ride. This is about managing your day effectively. So if you drop a bottle, pick another one up. If you drop a gel, get another one at the next aid station. You can't be taking chances, because your nutrition is one of the biggest things that can let you down on race day and you not achieve your potential. So yeah, that's my sort of lecture on that. John, have you got anything that I know I just took a couple of yours?
Yeah, well, I'm not that familiar with the lay of the land, but the big one for me is it's so easy to cruise over the top of the hill when we're patting ourselves on the back for a job well done. And it can, you know, if there's 10 or 15 or 20 little lumps over the course of 112 miles, it adds up, and it can give you a significant penalty if you don't work over the top. Likewise, you know, we've cruised down to the bottom of the hill, and it's very easy to just roll out onto the flat. But, you know, get your gear selected, get your mind in gear right. I'm going to cruise into a certain effort level on an RPE or a certain power number that you've discussed with your coach. And just that really, the big one is early on in the race, get the fuel in you. Give yourself 5 or 10 minutes, get a drink of water early on, but then get into it, whether you're setting an alarm on your watch or you've got you've picked out spots on the course, but that's probably the most important thing, because that will get you through the run, but that will make sure you are in the best condition for the run, which is where the race begins for lots of people, really.
Of course it is. We need to get to the run in as good a shape as we possibly can, and then we can have some chance at executing a good marathon.
There was just a quick question on cramping up during the bike and the run. Have you got any tips on that? I'd say maybe on the bike, just try changing your cadence for a bit, standing up, getting up out the bars, just changing the mechanical angle with which you're cycling, and that may be enough.
So, I mean, there's a lot written about cramps, but it's mostly by people looking to sell you salt tablets generally. I don't think for the majority of people it's actually a salt issue or an electrolyte problem. I think it's a lack of conditioning. Now, I'm not saying you're unfit, because I get cramp quite badly and quite regularly, and I'd like to think I'm quite well conditioned, but cramps often come when you do something that you've not replicated very often. So, for instance, if you are going to ride in the TT position for 100 miles plus, you could cramp up just because you're in that position, and your muscles, whilst they might be fit and they might be strong, they might never have had to push that power level for 5 hours in the tucked position, because it's very, as much as we train and we do our best to build the volume and the mileage, it's hard to replicate that. And it's also hard to replicate it kind of often enough to really get the muscles used to it. Now, obviously within TTT and probably other coaching practices, we use the big gear sessions. We try and get the muscles overloaded through the training. We try to spend lots of time in the TT position. So that does help. But again, the Ironman course at UK has some ramps and pitches that you just have to give it everything to get over the top of. So the pacing goes out on occasion, and that could lead to cramp as well. Muscles tend to cramp up when they're held in a shortened position. It's the muscles. So if you're using a muscle and it's going from stretch to shorten to stretch to shorten, muscles quite like that. But if you've got a muscle in a shortened position and when it's contracting, it's only doing that much, it's more likely to cramp because it's never getting to relax. It's never getting to stretch and change its position. And so my cramp is often in my adductors, like my groin muscle down the inside of my thigh. And it only ever happens in Ironman, and it happens somewhere between 90 and 100 miles in. And it's happened to me pretty much every single race I have ever done, no matter what I seem to do about it. And I've hammered the salt, I've hammered the fluid, so I'm peeing every hour on the bike. I've tried quite a few things, and it still happens. So I think it's me, my position, my pedaling style, and just the extreme nature of that event. So I think some people are genetically crampers. If you've always suffered with cramp after sporting events and things like that, you might just be one of those people who are genetically a little bit susceptible to cramp. By all means, tick off the electrolytes, tick off the fluids, do the simple stuff. If you do get it, you've got to allow that muscle to stretch, to move, to relax. And as John said, that might mean standing up, sitting up on the bars. Hopefully it won't mean getting off the bike. If you get it on the run, obviously this is where we could talk about run walk strategy and other things to try to change the usage of your muscles during the run. So if you walk every so many minutes, 15, 20 minutes, take a 1 minute walk break, you'll engage different muscles. You'll be able to stretch your calves a little bit. If you go for a good heel strike, you can allow your torso to relax. You can get nutrition in better. There's lots of reasons to have a walk break. But it is quite good for preventing cramp because you're not repeating the same action. You're breaking the cycle. But you'd want to do that from a schedule from the beginning. Don't wait till you start to get cramp and then introduce these walk breaks. You would want to do it from really quite early on, from the first 5K, even though that might feel like giving in because you think, no, I can still run at this point, but it probably will come back and get you a bit later. So I think cramp for some people is just a likely occurrence. You could massage it. Obviously, we see what the footballers do and stretch and put your thumbs into it and things like that. But basically change what you're doing, change the way the muscles are working, and it will prevent it for a little while. I think actually something that Matt Dixon mentioned on his podcast, which was quite interesting, was the course at Bolton, with it being a lumpy run and undulating along Chorley New Road. That's quite good for preventing cramp, because you're using different muscles. You're actually probably more likely to get cramp on a very flat, monotonous style course, because there's no need to alter the muscle activity. But you'll be going up through the park, which is very steep, and you might be walking or you might be jogging slowly, and that's a lot of posterior chain, that's a lot of hamstrings and calves. When you're descending, it's all anterior chain. You're going to be using your quads to get you down the hill. So in a way, it's quite nice from that point of view, that you'll probably be utilizing lots of various muscle groups. But don't, if you get it, don't fret. It might not come on massively if you can control it. So just be a little bit cautious and just be proactive and change what you're doing at the time. I've just seen another question. Oh, go on, mate. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I just check something you said? Would you be an advocate then on that particular course of coming out of your target power to get some of the shorter hills done quicker?
Yeah. So the two tactics is maintain as much speed down the descent as you're comfortable with. So we don't want to put anybody at risk by saying go hell for leather down the descents. But a lot of the hills at Bolton come after a descent. It's a rolling course. It's not like you're going flat and then suddenly you come at it with no inertia and no momentum. So if you can maintain a really good speed, there's a couple of the hills particularly, you can be nearly 50% up them with the speed from the bottom of the hill. Obviously select the right gear before you get to that point, because what you can't do, and a point that Gavin Rogers mentioned, is you can't go from the big chain ring to the small chain ring once you're under tension. Soon as you're struggling up that hill and you go for that front chain ring, it's very likely to jump right off the inside and jam between the bottom bracket and the inner chain ring. And then it can be absolutely awful to try to get it out if you're unlucky. So predict the hill, build the speed. And then, if it was one of the ones, there are a few where you're up it within 60 seconds or so, I would almost ignore the power, ignore the heart rate, not smash it, but you can raise it, to an RPE of like 8 out of 10 just for 60 seconds. And then you'll settle in. And when you've got the chance, you'll relook at your heart rate, your power, you'll bring it back under control. The bigger climbs, like the golf course one, the one through the housing estate fairly early on the Bolton Loop, and then the one up the wrong side of Sheep House from Belmont. Those three, which are kind of the three major climbs, you'd want to pace them. They're long enough. The first one's probably 2 or 3 minutes long. The golf course one might be 5 minutes long, and the Belmont's probably 6 to 8 minutes long, or so, I'd a guess. So they need to be paced a little bit more. And yes, you'll put more power down, but you won't go above threshold, would be my advice on those. The short little kickers, just go by feel. Yeah.
Cool. Cheers.
I've just seen another question here on special needs bag. Tony, do you happen to know where the special needs drop off is? I know it's not at an aid station, or it didn't used to be. It used to be just a separate point where all these bags would be laid on the floor.
Yeah, I think that can change, to be honest, Phil, from race to they'll literally tell you when you go and get that, you have to go and ask for the special needs bag.
Yeah.
And then they'll tell you where it's going to be. Yeah.
Yeah. And when do you get the bag?
At registration, I think.
Right. So is it the same registration as normal? You're still doing that in person? And
Yeah. So obviously, I mean, most people know this, but you go into your active account, book a registration slot time, and then when you go there, that's when you get the bag. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you ask for the bag and you're going to take one, then that's the time to make sure you know where it's going to be on the course.
Yeah, they have a separate desk for that bag, so you just go to that bag and their desk and get the bag. Sorry, yeah.
I was just going to say, in the athlete pack, I think it looks like there's multiple locations, and you can. Could you pick to drop it somewhere? Looks like there's about 5 or 6 locations. We've all got mile markers.
Right. So again, it's probably up to you to decide where you think you might need it most, judging on your race distance or your speed or how much nutrition you've got on your bike to start with. So maybe it's probably going to be a little bit of an estimate, but it's worth having as a backup. And then if things go wrong and bottles are bouncing all out of your bike, everywhere, then you've got something to fall back on. Go on. There's one more there on the chat, and then I've got one more question already sent in. So what's your view on compression clothing, socks in relation to performance? So 2 things. They haven't been shown, from what I've seen, to improve performance, but they do reduce soreness and they reduce sort of the shock that goes on. And basically it's the jiggling of your muscles. When you land on the floor when you're running and your muscles and your fascia jiggle up and down, they stop that. So they will stop some of the micro damage to your muscles. On race day, might make it a little bit easier. It's probably more of a useful tool during your training. It might aid in venous return, so it might help getting some of the blood out of your leg. As you know, people with all sorts of circulatory problems can wear these types of stockings, and we've got them for flights and stuff like that. So, they can be useful. There's no evidence, though, that it really improves performance. But what it does is it can help recovery. It can help reduce soreness. And there's a bit of a placebo in it. So if you like the feeling, if they feel like they're holding you tight and you've got confidence in them, by all means, stick with them. You've got to go with what makes you feel good on race day. But I wouldn't say go and buy a pair of compressed sports socks from the expo just out of the off chance that they'll help you. Yeah, and they cost a fortune. Yeah,
They cost a fortune.
Yeah. What else have we got here? So, John, have you just answered one? What's that one? At the aid station,
yeah,
give out
about discarding rubbish. Usually, as you enter an aid station, the first area on your right hand side, there'll be an area marked by a beginning and an end.
Yeah.
Just for ditching your stuff. And I think there might be one at the end as well.
There's quite often
certainly
wheelie bins, isn't there? The big rectangular wheelie bins. It's quite nice to try and lock
if you get it straight in the bin.
Yeah. Although don't do that if you're concerned you might fall off your bike at the same time. It says hopefully the 2 bottles. So it says they're going to have Gatorade in bottles with a sports cap, and they're going to have water in 750 bottles. With any luck, they will both fit perfectly in your bottle cage. That should be why they've decided to use them, so that they're the right size to go in your bottle cage. That would be absolutely daft if they don't. Yes.
And worth slowing
think
down just a touch. Yeah, for the aid stations as well, just to make sure you get the stuff.
Yeah, they have. So they'll have a set of bins as you enter. So if you're slowing down, get rid of your gels, your wrappers, whatever you want as you enter. You've then got, 100 meters to pick up what you want. And then if it was a case of what you've got is a front built-in bottle system, and you're going to squirt your water or your energy drink straight in, you will have another sort of 50, 100 meters to lob that bottle in another sort of bin or refuse area straight after your transit, your nutrition stop, your aid station. So that shouldn't be a problem, but I'm very hopeful it will fit in your bottle cages with a standard bottle size. So the final one that I've got before was, well, this one doesn't really matter, I don't think. This is a simple one. Massage before or after. So after, you can do what the hell you like. You can get pissed, you can eat what you like, you can, have a reward, and massage might be part of that. But also you might decide to save your money and go to the pub instead, because most of us are not recovering on a tight schedule, and we've got as much time off as we like. Before, I would say it would need to be in the next 3 or 4 days. You don't have much time to get a massage, and don't get one on the off chance it's going to give you some sort of miraculous cure or fitness boost. If you're used to massages, you will probably know that for 1 day at least, you tend to feel really quite sore, depending on which masseur you go to. So I would, my rough tool, again, rough sort of guide would be same as we've said for everything. Don't do something this week you have never done before. It's stupid and it's silly. And then secondly, if you're going to get it done, I would say like Tuesday at the latest. And so if you've not booked one, the chance of you getting in now is probably minuscule.
And go to somebody that you've used before and you're familiar with their techniques and their pressures, and they know you, and or all of those basic things. Yeah, don't change anything.
Somebody that you can say, look, don't try and prove a point and hurt me as much as you can. Look, just a nice, easy one. But yeah, again, if you've done it before and it makes you feel better and you've got it scheduled in, it will be absolutely fine. Otherwise, I'd say just don't bother. We don't need to add anything extra at this point.
Super.
Cool. Right. Now, guys, that's about an hour nearly. That's all of the questions that we've had already. If anybody wants to put anything else on the chat, or if you'd like to come off mute and ask us any questions in person, you're very welcome to.
I've got a question about the swim start. obviously this is first Ironman for me, and I've obviously done an Ironman distance swim, and I've got an idea of what I'm roughly going to do the swim in. How is that self-seeded at the start? Is there like markers as to where your expected swim time is?
Yeah. So I think the first one will be 55 minutes. I think the very first one that you see that's right near the water's edge, it either says 55 or like sub 55 or something like that. And I'm not sub 55, but I just stood on the front because at least you know you're going to get straight in. I was
going to ask this as well.
Yeah, obviously they don't know what you're going to swim. A lot of people, what seems to be quite British is you go and you overseed yourself, so you go higher than you think. But that seems to be a common thing. I think most people tend to, if you think you're a 130, you go and stand near 120 or a bit closer to 115 than where 130 is. My feeling would be go somewhere close to where you think you're going to swim. So at least you're not going to get absolutely battered by people. And it's not that they're battering you. It's just if they are coming behind you at such a pace and then they're going to swim into you, it's just going to happen. So I'd go roughly in the right area, but I would seed myself a little bit higher. And I do find that race pace, because there is mass drafting, even if you're not right on somebody's feet with nearly 1,000 people or whatever swimming in the same direction, if you sight pretty well and you're within a group to some extent, I think your swim time will be a little bit faster than you expect. So don't force it, don't rush it. But yeah, don't think you've got to go and stand up with the sub 1 hour ones if you're 15 minutes slower than that in reality. There's no need to be jamming right up at the front.
Yeah.
How spread out are those times normally? 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
Well, you get in a rolling start, so you'll actually start just whenever you get to go in the water. But I think there's a 55 and then there's an hour. And it goes all the way back to 2 hours, but I don't think they're every 5 minutes. Like, I don't think there's a marker post every 5 minutes. Tony, do you know?
I think it's 15 minutes, Phil, from what I can remember. And then it depends. I mean, at various different races, they've been doing 5 seconds, they're sending you in. In fact, they've had a beeper sometimes, haven't they? And it's literally beep, and then 5 people go, and then another 5. Yeah. So they'll try and control the flow into the water as well.
See, they didn't do that last time.
Is that what they're doing this year, rather than sort of staggered starts, which we've had at lots of other races? It's still five athletes every 10 or 15 seconds.
They'll just be controlling you in that way. Yeah. It's not big mass chunks of. I mean, it's different if some of these other races abroad, the wide beaches where 50 people can go in at once. The way that it is at the Flash, and Phil will know this, you can only get a couple of people into the water at once, can't you, Phil?
Yeah. But obviously pre-COVID, they would just let you line up all like basically hugging each other that close, and then you just walk and then jump in and you're off. But yeah, I don't know how they're going to manage that, how far apart you're going to be, whether they're going to try and keep some people back in transition and let so many through, so we're keeping a bit of distance. But obviously you need to just check that with the registration process or what's in the pack if they give you an idea. When do we drop our bags off for the run? It says Saturday at Queen's Park in the athlete info, but we don't have any drop-off times like we do for registration or your bike. I think, my personal attitude is all those times are just guidelines. I think you can turn up when you like, really. They're not going to turn you away. But I think it's just to try and manage the flow of people. So they're giving everybody a time slot in the hope that it diffuses the flow of people through the whole day. But yeah, okay, if there's no time for T2, then you could, whatever suits you, take it before you rack your bike if you want to do it that way around, or take it after. But yeah, when I've turned up, sometimes hours away from when I should have turned up, nobody bats an eyelid. They just let you straight in and you just go about your business. Yeah, I think you should pee in your wetsuit, I think, and then pee in your tri-suit if you need to, pee down your shoes, whatever, all over your bike. If it prevents you from stopping, just pee wherever.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more? Has anybody got anything else that they'd like to get off the chest?
Don't forget your power meter battery. We all charge our Garmins and charge our watches, but that little battery in your crank. Don't forget to stick a new one in and check it's a good battery before you rock up. Likewise, your heart rate monitor if you're using one.
Yeah, and don't leave your SRAM ETAP battery on the charger at home, which I've done.
Okay.
Yeah, are we done? Anybody got anything else? Or we'll conclude it there.
No, I've not got any.
Cool. Well, the main
Cheers.
thing.
Good luck, everybody. Enjoy it.
Have a great race. Stick to
Don't forget to
plan.
say thank you to all the marshals.
Yeah, enjoy it. Smile.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
This was really good, really helpful.
Yeah,
Well,
brilliant.
Very well.
Thank you. Brilliant.
Yeah,
Thanks, guys.
yeah. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot.
No worries,
Thanks.
Rosie.
Cheers, Phil. Thanks, guys.
Good stuff.